Hello and welcome to Bharat I'm Brigadier Chatterjee. We're going to be talking about India-US military relationships today primarily. Of course, a little beyond that if wherever required. And let me first and foremost get the guest onto the stage. And our guest for the day is Lieutenant General Anil Ahuja. Uh, General Ahuja, welcome to Bharat.
Good afternoon, Brigadier Chatterjee. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, General, as we are aware, both of us are quite aware that we're going to be talking about the Indo-American relationship. I just want to make a few basic points before I put across my first question to you. And the issues that I want to touch upon as an introductory remark, let's say, is firstly that India and US are, uh, they have a major defense partnership between them. But we cannot wish away the Russian connect to this particular issue of our partnership with the United States. We've been buying a lot of equipment from the United States. There's the Chinooks, there 155 gun, there's Apache helicopters, all that. But one has to remember that we have about 50 to 60% of our inventory, which is Russian military equipment inventory that is Russian, and so that has an influence on the way we go forward with the Americans. Perhaps we'll get into more details once we get along with the discussion. The next issue is China is a driving factor for both of us, for India as well as for the Americans. And they're the biggest threat as far as we are concerned. And the Americans also understand that they are the ones who are going to be the bigger threat tomorrow for them. Well, so that's some commonality perhaps that we have in our threat perception. Uh, the challenges have multiplied in our managing this relationship between us and Americans with the Ukraine war having started. We are not on the same page, nor are we totally on different pages. Uh, where we have to find a way again together is this particular area of Ukraine war. Uh, and, post all these things like Jack Sullivan's visit to this country. In fact, Jack Sullivan has visited Indo-Pacific countries about 11 times, I'm told. And of them, on two of these occasions, he was over here, and Campbell was also with him. So obviously, there is a push from that side to uh, increase the intensity of the relationship, of the scope of the relationship, ICT, etc. Those are examples of it. But at the same time, our prime minister is going to Russia may have had a counter effect on it. So it will be a challenge tomorrow for us to maintain a balance between the two and go ahead with our relationship with the Americans also and the Russians also to some extent. Well, let me get on to my first issue that on which I would request your comments, and that is amidst this, ongoing global flux. We have Ukraine somewhere, we have Gaza somewhere else, etc. We have a flux. How do you place the Indo-US defense partnership today?
Thank you, Brigadier Chatterjee. And you've quite comprehensively contextualized this relationship. So let me come to your question straight away that in this geopolitical flux, how do we place this partnership? At a macro level, we understand that the epicenter of the intense geopolitical contestation that is going on has shifted to the Indo-Pacific. It's a well-known fact. And the fact of intensifying Chinese hegemonic behavior in the Indo-Pacific towards the US, towards its allies, as also along our LAC is something which bothers us both. Now, we as India, we we retain the policy of independence decision making. You call it independence in decision making, you call it strategic autonomy, and we are very clear in our mind that we want to manage these challenges ourselves without joining any alliance system. And to do that, we are looking at building our capability. And we are looking at bridging the substantial gap that exists in capabilities between us and China. Now, we would all appreciate that that's a challenging task. Economic asymmetry, we have about one-fifth of the Chinese economy, military technology asymmetry. But then we have our own advantages along the LAC. Now, in this interim that we bridge this gap, we need strategic partnerships. And the comprehensive global strategic partnership that we have with the US today is the most consequential. And why I say that is most consequential? Because both countries, though belatedly, have realized that there is a mutual dependence. For US, supporting India build its own capabilities is even in their national interests to meet the China challenge. India provides them attractive source of talented, technologically qualified human resources for bridging their technology gap with China. We are a large market. We help them make their supply chains resilient. And for us, America brings in trade, it brings in technology, it brings in the geopolitical benefits, it supports our innovators, MSMEs. So when I place this relationship, I would place it as a consequential relationship driven by geopolitical congruence and realization of the reality of mutual dependence. That's how I would contextualize it at the macro level.
Right. Thank you. If you go ahead, how do you make an assessment over the of the overall trend of this relationship today, and uh, which direction do you see it going, progressing ahead?
Well, if I was to give you a very, very short answer, I would say the trend's positive and the pace impressive. Now, to elaborate on this, in a matter of about 2.5 decades, we generally take the beginning of this century, or more specifically, as the Indo-US civil nuclear deal, we take it as a watershed in our relationship. So, in 2.5 decades, we moved from a state of estrangement to, if I may say, a state of engagement, and particularly so in the field of defense. And the viewers may like to take a note of this, that our engagement in the field of defense with the US started nearly a decade ahead of the India US civil nuclear deal. This famous Malabar exercise that we keep talking of. It started as a bilateral exercise in 1992. And then we had these services, Army, Navy, Air Force, executive steering groups, defense planning group, etc., etc. They came up in 1990s. Then we moved further. In 2004, we had something called the next step in strategic partnership. We started cooperating in field of civil space, field of nuclear, in the nuclear field, in other high technologies. Thereafter, what we did was, as the relations improved, we started procuring certain equipment. First, it was just to meet our operational needs, and progressively to bring certain amount of manufacturing to India. You would know our M777 ultralight howitzers. We just didn't buy them off the shelf. We bought them, and we had assembly, integration and testing center established in India. Now we are talking of co-production. We are talking of setting up maintenance MRO facilities for the MQ9s that we are looking at. We have this mastership repair agreement. And the equipment that we've got: C-130s, C-70s, Apaches, Chinooks, MH-60s, ultralight howitzers, G-404, 414, and now MQ-9s, etc. Now, in terms of exercises, we have the largest number of exercises that the two countries do. The Army exercise, Yuddha Abhyas, we keep hearing of it. It started way back in 2002. The Air Force exercise started in 2004. Then we had the SF starting to do exercise Vraj Prahar since 2010. Then we had NSG doing exercise with them. And then we had this tri-service exercise since 2019, Tiger Triumph. And not only are we exercising with Indo-Pacom, now we've started exercising with CENTCOM also. We have our LOs placed with each other. And then you briefly mentioned about the major defense partner status in 2016. We signed these foundational agreements, LIMOA, COMCASA, BECA, Industrial Security Annex, for exchanging classified information with the private industry. India was placed in Strategic Trade Authorization STA1 status. And we, on our part, revised our defense acquisition process twice to accommodate some of the concerns that existed. So when we are looking at the trend of this relationship and how it's progressing, we have the building blocks in place now. What we saw was that till the end of Trump administration, defense was unequivocally the central pillar of engagement, and the engagement was Pentagon led. But Biden administration, the relationship has primarily been State Department led, and there's been an effort to diversify relationship beyond beyond the defense per se. And now we are getting into technology cooperation. We are getting into defense industrial cooperation. Now, defense and technology, when they come, industry and technology, they add ballast to the relationship because they build on exercises, exchange of visits, training, etc., etc. Because you just can't plug in and plug out. You would recall 1998 when we had our nuclear tests. The Malabar exercise is finished for a few days. So today, we are trying to add weight to ballast and to make it more stable. So this is the trend of relationship as it's moving, and the trajectory, like I said, is positive.
Right. I think that's a very positive story that you put across. But we have to address those areas where we do not find congruence. So, what are the differences really between our approach, let's say, and the Americans' approach?
See, I think we need to understand at the very basic that both of us, both our countries, are vibrant democracies. There will be differences and there will be engagement. Both will proceed simultaneously. At a macro level, geopolitically, India stands for a transparent and equitable, multipolar global order, whereas the US prefers, obviously, a US-led unipolar order. So we have our difference of perception at what kind of a global order we want to see emerge. And then there are differences at between our respective perspectives on the global south. Now, be that as it may, if I come to the defense field per se, first of all, we have our contradictions on Russia, of our relationship with Russia. Then there is a lack of appreciation of India's challenges in the continental domain. We have much greater convergence in the maritime domain in the Indo-Pacific, but there isn't that great realization of how we are contending with our challenges in the Himalayas. Then there is, even in the maritime domain, there is a disparity in the perception of the priority of the regions. For Americans, East Asia and Southeast Asia are the priorities. For us, obviously, Indian Ocean remains the priority. Then uh, India has an apprehension of becoming a frontline state in US China contestation when, as a partner, what we can get is assurance. Obviously, not being an ally, we are not getting a commitment of somebody standing by us. Then another big issue is of interoperability. The US side feels interoperability is a function of having same platforms. We always insist that we have different platforms, many of them of the Soviet or the Russian origin. We feel it's a function of communication, command and control, sorting out our SOPs and drills that we can get interoperability like this. Then, over issues of indigenization, what we call Atmanirbharta is perceived as protectionism on their side. And then the issue of obligations and commitments between allies and partners. US finds it very difficult to deal with a partner because they are used to dealing more with allies. And finally, the last bit, what I would like to highlight is, there is a dichotomy in the pecking order, if I may say. In the pecking order of US trust and engagement, it is the Five Eyes, the NATO partners, the Indo-Pacific allies, and then partners like India and others. Whereas in terms of relevance in the Indo-Pacific, we are somewhere on the top. So if in engagement we are low, if in requirement we are here, we need to converge these gaps. So these are some of the differences, but then we'll learn to work through these.
Our borders, a symbol of strength, guarded by our brave warriors. As the proverb goes, armor strengthens the greatest warrior. A1's fences are that armor for the armed forces. A1 Fence delivers quality in every inch, products, services, and insights, providing solutions, tackling every challenge in any terrain or condition. A1 Fence, securing our borders silently.
Look, how do you see these differences? Like you brought out the differences, very fine, understood. But how much, to what extent will they really impact the future relationship? Will we be able to convince the US that we are as important as a partner as the ally is? Will we be able to convince them that the Indo-Pacific is really the key area, South China Sea, maybe also another key area, and further East Asia also a key area, but we are definitely the central to Indo-Pacific.
No, you're right. The differences are differences. They take time to, for the perceptions to reconcile. It takes time. Let me and having worked on this personally, I realized that we know how to work with each other, and to quite a large extent, we know how to work around these. Let me just amplify. When we started working on these agreements, what we call the foundational agreements, now world over, they call it LSA, Logistic Support Agreement. They call it SISMOA. And of course, BECA is called BECA all over. But we started off with fundamental differences that, are they foundational? Are they really foundational? So we said, oh, let's call them enabling agreements. LSA, if we have reservations over LSA, let's call it LEMOA. If we have reservations of calling it SISMOA, let's call it COMCASA. So, like this, even the designation major defense partner, I mean, it's a unique designation arrived at with due deliberation. Now, even for CATSA, take your mind back to 2017-18. There was so much of concern over sanctions under CATSA. But then 2018, the first 2+2 dialogue was postponed twice due to various apprehensions. But then we held it in September, it went off very well, and now we are in 2024 having these regularly. So there's a basic understanding, a better understanding of the rationale of our cooperation, of the long term benefits. Americans may not have liked our stance on Ukraine, but in the interest of our long term partnership and the greater benefits that we get, we have learned to work with each other. So also is for technology. Our expectations have been moderated. They have made certain amount of understanding, certain amount of greater adjustment to their restrictions. There is a better understanding even of the rationale of our relationship with Russia. So the issue is both sides have to understand that this is a relationship of mutual benefit, and defense and certain critical technologies are the central pillar. There will be turbulence, there will be differences over issues related to human rights, civil rights, freedom, religion, pannus and nijjars, and there'll be many of these things which will happen. But we have to insulate the core areas of our relationship and move on. And there's no reason why two mature nations like ours can't take this relationship further and overcome these differences or have a better understanding of these as we go along.
Right. In very short, can you just describe the issues that have now become buzzwords? I said, IndoUS, etc. How does it affect our strategic relationship? In very few words.
See, as we understand, technology is the new currency of national power. And the focus, like I had mentioned earlier, is now onto technology cooperation and industrial cooperation. Now, ISET stands for India-US Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. This got initiated between our Prime Minister and US President in May 22 at Tokyo. And thereafter, we had the first meeting last year in January between the two NSAs at Washington. And this year, just last month, mid last month, Jake Sullivan was here. And the second meeting of this was held. Now, the technology cooperation, the span of this cooperation goes beyond the field of defense. And broadly, it has space, semiconductors, advanced telecommunications, AI, quantum, biotechnology, critical materials, clean energy, etc., etc. Many of these are dual use. Many of these are in civil field. A lot of them are there. And the level at which we are trying to bring convergence has been taken to the level of NSAs. Now, within this, the other terminology you mentioned was IndoUS. It is India-US acceleration, a defense acceleration ecosystem. Now, this is like an innovation bridge between the two countries. You have the Defense Innovation Unit on the American side. We have the Defense Innovation Organization on the Indian side. They come together, and the stakeholders include industry and academia, investors. What they're doing is they're trying to pick up the best best talent on both sides, the innovators, and mentor them, incubate them, fund them, and bring them in touch with the major OEMs so that we are able to strengthen our technological cooperation and go ahead and bridge the gap that exists with other countries. So broadly, this is the thing which is gone beyond defense. It has dual use. It brings in innovators. It tries to explore the innovation system between our two countries.
Right. Talking about technology, I would like to talk a little bit about DTTI. Defense Technology and Trade Initiative, of which, if I'm not wrong, you were the first co-chair, founding co-chair of this organization. That didn't work, but you're saying ISET will work.
Well, yes, I was the co-chair quite some time back. To say that it didn't work, well, I have my reservations to this prevailing conception that is there. If DTTI had not worked, probably we wouldn't have talked of aero engines and the kind of technology cooperation that we are talking of in the very first year of ISET. Definitely, some foundations were laid. DTTI, I always say, has been a silent enabler. This taught us to work together. We had very unrealistic expectations. Can you beat it? That defense technology trade initiative, this is what we said. The American side in their document said defense trade technology initiative. So their priority was trade, our priority was technology. Some of their industry expected non-competitive access to our markets. We expected technology to come to us packaged overnight. Both sides learned to work with each other. We learned how to work on project agreements, etc. But now, like I said, in ISET, from Secretary Defense Production, who used to head the DTTI on our side and an undersecretary on the US side. Now both sides, the national security advisors are addressing. The scope has enhanced. Stakeholders have enhanced. And we have put the building blocks in place. So I'm quite hopeful that with so many stakeholders, this will work. I'm quite optimistic about it.
We all are optimistic about it, but the differences got highlighted a little bit. When the Prime Minister went to Moscow, there was a lot of hue and cry there in Washington about it. What do you say?
Yes, definitely. There has been hue and cry, and you read American media or you read Indian media. Definitely, there are reservations on both sides when think tanks talk, when people talk. But then there has to be a better understanding and greater dialogue and transparency at the policy making level. Now, we've covered the Russia bit a little bit earlier in our conversation. Now, both sides have to understand that there are two dimensions of this relationship. There's a bilateral dimension and there's a geopolitical dimension. Bilaterally, we have legacy dependency in defense. We have it. The percentage of equipment is progressively reducing. Even our acquisitions have got shifted. Like according to CIPRI in 2019-2023, now this block, our acquisitions from Russia were 36%. It is for the first time in 50 years that the acquisitions of India came down below 50% from Russia. But then things have got adjusted because our baskets have changed. So what I'm trying to say is in bilateral relationship, there's a legacy dependency in defense. There is dependency for meeting continental challenges. There is issue of energy security and in geopolitics. To meet the China challenge, we need relationship with both. We need relationship with America to build our future capabilities. We need relationship with Russia to manage large number of continental and geopolitical aspects. Let's understand that our trade with US may be higher, our imports may be, our exports may be higher with them. Even in defense, we may have acquired $25 odd billion in last since 2008, but the depth of relationship with Russia, BrahMos, Chakra, many strategic nuclear programs, Well, there is depth. So both have significance, and both sides have to understand that it is not a zero sum game. We have a convergence of vision between us and US about free and open Indo-Pacific, and about building our capability to meet the common challenge. And even for Russia, we are a useful partner for them falling into totally into the lap of China. So I think both have to understand, and we both have to be understanding of each other's compulsions. So probably we'll be able to tide over these periodic turbulence that come in our relations.
Right. Let me get the dragon into the equation now. The Chinese, I mean. And if we have a slight improvement with the Chinese in our relationship, there's cause for concern perhaps in Washington. And if they have a similar kind of an improvement with the Chinese, there's a cause for concern in New Delhi also. Now, how do you see this Chinese angle playing out?
Yes, it definitely is an important angle. Please take your mind back to US National Security Strategy 2022, where they said China is the only competitor to the US with intent and increasingly the capacity to reshape the international order. So, yes, they have realized the China challenge. They will follow different paths. They'll cooperate, they'll compete, they will confront each other. There may be conflict between them. We heard of decoupling initially, then we've heard of de-risking. This is how the powers will manage their relationships. You look back last 1 year, we had plethora of US high-ranking visits to China. Besides the meeting between Xi and Biden last year on the sidelines of EPIC. And now you had Secretary of State Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, she went there. Henry Kissinger went there just before his demise. John Kerry was there, CIA director was there, huge business delegation, strategic and academic delegation was there in March this year. So, yes, it takes us back to 2008, 2009, the time during Obama administration when there was talk of G2. And China thought America had come down to its knees and all, and it did cause us concern. Similarly, now after the budget, around the budget, when our economic advisors say, chief economic advisor says, increased investment from China may help us to boost India's manufacturing, or India should ease certain restrictions that had been imposed post Galwan. Well, yes, US also has its concerns. Now, both sides have their concerns, but then between two countries of understanding, they should understand what is the limit of rapprochement. Every little rapprochement, every little thaw in the relations need not be just throwing away all differences, reconciling, and back to being Hindi Chini bye bye. So neither will there be a G2 tomorrow morning, nor there'll be a Hindi Chini bye bye tomorrow morning. There will be management of relationship in which there'll be understanding, there'll be compromises, there'll be confrontations. So I think the two countries are mature enough to realize that these are matter of dealing, nuancing, transacting our relationship. And this is a constant process.
Right, General, one last issue. It's not an issue really. I want to summing up more or less for you. How do we give this relationship more depth, more stability in the Indo-US relationship? And if you can keep it very brief.
Okay, let me just give you 4-5 points just to finish.
Right.
Number
exactly.
one. First point is concerted effort to develop trust, because defense, security, national security, trust is paramount. Number two, create demonstrable symbol of trust. You know, between India and Russia, we have our BrahMos moment, we have our Chakra moment. We need a BrahMos moment between India and the US. Number three, I had mentioned that some critical relationship need to be insulated from the turbulence that happens in democracies. Number four, America has to be pragmatic about their ITAR restrictions, etc. They must understand that technology is available in the world. There are countries available to share it. So there will be proliferation anyhow. Be pragmatic without letting go of proliferation concerns, and better appreciation of India's continental challenges in the region that we live. And finally, relationship works when you respect each other as co-equals. We both need each other. We both contribute to each other's national interests. I think if we remain mindful of that, probably we can take it better. That's all.
Right. Thank you, General. Thank you so much for having spared your time for BharatShakti.in. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Right, viewers, thank you so much for tuning into BharatShakti.in, and do tune in like this now and then, and you will find such important discussions. Thank you.